Imagine you've survived Ragnarok. The realms are shattered. Odin is dead.
Find your way home.
Thor has fallen.
You are free.
The old order lies buried beneath snow, ash, and the consequences of Kratos' parenting decisions. And somewhere, beyond the Nine Realms, new stories are stirring. Rumors have turned a cold hard fact around a God of War title centered on Laufey, the giantess known to most players simply as Fae. Santa Monica Studio is preparing to leave the familiar territories of Greek and Norse mythology behind, stepping into entirely new mythological landscapes. There are two fascinating figures from real-world mythology that deserve our attention. Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of divine wrath from Egypt, and Begtse, the armored war god of Tibetan and Mongolian tradition. At first glance, these deities seem lightly related or even unrelated at all. One nearly exterminated humanity in a drunken blood frenzy, and the other marches through spiritual battlefields wearing armor and carrying the heart of a fallen enemy. Naturally, this means they're exactly the sort of mythological figures God of War would be interested in. So today, we're diving into the real-world mythology behind these terrifying deities and exploring how their stories may influence the future of God of War.
Have you or a loved one been unjustly exposed to the maddening effects of the Necronomicon? Did you purchase friendly house spirits that have now become violent and malicious? Has Grandpa shown up on the door smelling like the grave and talking about how hungry he is? Well, unfortunately for all of you, I am not a lawyer and I can't actually do anything about that, but I do run the page Scald of Cthulhu. Here, every single day, I like to talk about grim dark lore, be it vampiric creatures and spirits from cultures all around the world, to mythological items, superstitions that I guarantee you never heard of, weird words, stupid little skits like this that are marginally better and more well put together, and also, if you love anything from the Cthulhu mythos, you're going to find it here, from beasts to gods to actual media review. One of my most recent long-form videos was reviewing an animated short on the other gods. It's actually pretty cool. You should check it out. But seriously, if Grandpa is at the door and he's asking you to let him in, please just don't.
One of the most fascinating aspects of modern God of War is its treatment of mythology. The series doesn't simply retell myths, it examines them, for better or worse. It asks what happens when gods are flawed. What happens when divine power becomes obsession? What happens when cosmic order is maintained by beings who are every bit as broken as the mortals beneath them? These themes aren't unique to Greece or Scandinavia. They're found everywhere. And that's what makes figures like Sekhmet and Begtse so interesting. Each represents a different aspect of divine violence. One embodies rage unleashed. The other embodies warfare disciplined and sanctified. Together, they reveal how ancient cultures understood power, justice, destruction, and the terrifying responsibilities that come with them. Let's begin with Sekhmet. If you were creating a God of War boss, she'd practically design herself. Sekhmet was one of the most important goddesses in ancient Egypt. She's typically depicted as a woman with the head of a lioness crowned by a solar disk, immediately signaling her connection to both kingship and the blazing power of the sun. But appearances only tell part of the story, naturally. Sekhmet wasn't merely a war goddess. She was divine wrath given form. According to ancient mythology, she was the daughter of Ra, the supreme sun god. More importantly, she served as his eye, the instrument through which he projected his power into the world. When Ra desired justice, Sekhmet delivered it. When Ra desired punishment, Sekhmet delivered that too, usually with considerably more claws than necessary. The Egyptians believed the scorching desert winds were her breath. Fire itself was associated with her anger. Plagues were said to be her servants. And yet, despite all this, she was worshipped as a healer. This apparent contradiction lies at the heart of Egyptian religion. The force capable of destroying life is often the same force capable of preserving it. The flood that nourishes crops can also drown entire settlements. The sun that sustains life can also scorch the earth. Likewise, Sekhmet could both send disease and cure it. Ancient physicians often worked under her protection. Imagine praying to the goddess who caused the plague in the hopes that she'll also be the one to stop it. That's a level of healthcare anxiety modern insurance companies can only dream of achieving. But Sekhmet's most famous story reveals exactly why she became so feared. the slaughter of mankind. One day, humanity decided it would be an excellent idea to rebel against Ra. As countless mythologies demonstrate, this tends to be the point where things go very badly. Ra responding by sending Sekhmet to punish humanity. And punish them she did. The goddess descended upon the earth and began slaughtering humanity with terrifying efficiency. But there was a problem. Sekhmet enjoyed it. A lot. What began as divine justice became an unstoppable massacre. Sekhmet's bloodlust grew beyond Ra's intentions. She became so consumed by destruction that she threatened not only the rebels, but humanity itself. Egyptian myths often emphasize the importance of balance. Sekhmet's story shows what happens when balance disappears. Even divine justice can become catastrophic when left unchecked. Realizing he had accidentally unleashed the mythological equivalent of a lion-shaped apocalypse, Ra devised a plan. The gods flooded the land with beer dyed red using ochre. The liquid resembled blood. Sekhmet discovered the crimson pools and eagerly drank them, and drank and drank, until she became spectacularly intoxicated. Her rage subsided, the slaughter ended, humanity survived. And somewhere in the distance, the ancient Egyptians invented the world's most extreme version of anger management. With the new god of war expanding into multiple mythologies, it just feels inevitable that Sekhmet would make an appearance. Think about the themes that define the modern series, right? Cycles of violence, burden of power, the struggle to control one's nature. These are exactly the themes embodied by Sekhmet. Her story mirrors many of Kratos' own conflicts. Both are weapons of divine authority. Both struggle with uncontrollable rage. Both demonstrate how power intended to create order can instead generate devastation. And perhaps most importantly, both exist in a constant tension between destruction and redemption. That's fertile ground for storytelling. Imagine a version of Sekhmet portrayed not simply as a monster to defeat, but as a tragic force attempting to reconcile her role as both protector and destroyer. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? That complexity would fit perfectly within Santa Monica's recent approach to mythology. Now let's travel far beyond Egypt, to the windswept steppes of Mongolia, to the mountain monasteries of Tibet, and to a deity who feels surprisingly overlooked in discussions about mythological settings, Begtse, known as the Great Coat of Mail. If Sekhmet represents fury unleashed, Begtse represents war transformed into sacred duty. Originally a pre-Buddhist Mongolian war god, Begtse was eventually incorporated into Tibetan Buddhism as a Dharmapala, or a protector of the Buddhist teachings. That's already fascinating in and of itself. Many mythological figures become marginalized when new religions emerge, but Begtse instead evolved. He was absorbed into a new spiritual framework while retaining much of his martial identity. The result is a deity unlike almost anything found in Western mythology. Begtse is impossible to ignore. Traditional depictions show him with blazing red skin, orange-red hair, 3 bloodshot eyes, a sword in one hand, a human heart in the other. He wears chainmail armor from which his title derives. Upon his head sits a helmet adorned with skulls. Surrounding him are supernatural attendants, warriors, generals, and a fearsome group known as the 29 Butchers. This sounds less like a Buddhist protector and more like the hit song on a heavy metal album. But appearances can be deceiving. In Tibetan Buddhist tradition, wrathful deities often appear terrifying not because they are evil, but because they are engaged in a cosmic struggle against ignorance, chaos, and spiritual obstacles. Their frightening forms are manifestations of enlightened power. Begtse is not a god of meaningless slaughter. He's a guardian, a protector, a divine warrior whose violence serves a spiritual purpose. And that distinction matters. This is where Begtse becomes particularly interesting when compared to figures like Ares, Thor, Tyr, or even Sekhmet. Many war gods embody conquest, victory, strength, domination. Begtse embodies protection. His warfare is directed towards defending sacred principles, much the way that we see Tyr depicted in the Scandinavian God of War. In many ways, this aligns remarkably well with the direction modern God of War has taken. Kratos is no longer driven purely by vengeance. His battles increasingly revolve around protecting others, defending family, preserving peace, preventing catastrophe. Begtse represents a philosophy of warfare that asks a profound question. Can violence ever be righteous? And if it can, what responsibilities accompany it? Those questions sit at the very center of modern God of War. So what do Sekhmet and Begtse tell us about God of War Laufey? Whether Santa Monica explores Egypt, Central Asia, Tibet, Mongolia, or entirely different mythologies, these figures reveal the kinds of themes that matter. Not simply gods versus mortals, not simply monsters versus heroes, but competing visions of power. Sekhmet warns of rage unrestrained. Begtse demonstrates the discipline of sacred warfare. One nearly destroys the world through excess. The other fights to preserve it through purpose. Together, they represent two radically different answers to the same question. What should divine power be used for? And that question feels particularly relevant for a game centered on Fae. Unlike Kratos, Fae often represented restraint rather than conquest, wisdom rather than domination, preparation rather than reaction. A story centered around her could explore these mythological themes from an entirely different perspective. The most compelling mythologies aren't merely collections of gods and monsters. They're reflections of humanity, humanity's fears, its hopes, its questions. Sekhmet embodies the terrifying reality that even justice can become destructive when pushed too far. Begtse embodies the equally challenging idea that strength may be necessary to protect what matters most. And if the future of God of War truly lies beyond the Nine Realms, these are exactly the kinds of myths worth exploring. Because hidden beneath the lion-headed goddess who nearly drank humanity into extinction and the armored war god carrying a human heart, lies a truth shared by mythologies across the world. Power is never the real challenge. The challenge is deciding what to do with it. And judging by God of War's history, that lesson is usually learned the hard way. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the real-world mythology that is inspiring one of my favorite series, God of War, then let me know in the comments below. Also, head to my website, blackfjordorder.com. Link is in the description for much more content and ways to support, like a $5 subscription. It's pretty basic, but also, if you like it, let the algo know. Otherwise, this video is going to die a slow death. Love you all. Thank you.